first item on here is employee position control, and ask Frank to kind of brief these items on here, and then we'll just begin with number 2 on here.
What I wanted to identify was that with position control, we have 2 separate issues, or 2 separate items that need to be segregated and discussed. One is that under position control within Munis, what the Munis system will allow us to do is to assist human resources and payroll with onboarding employees. So position control within Munis allows us to establish a default for a class of employees. And a class of employees is a group of employees that have similar title, similar categories within a CBA, and are paid from a salary table that is established again within the CBA. It also defines the L&I codes for that class of employee. It defines the EEOC for that class, the position type, whether it's a full-time, regular, exempt employee, so the type of employee that that class is, whether that class is 100% or if it's a temp, it's what the FTE categorization is. It defines the salary range for that group of employees, as well as longevity tables that are established for that, step increases in the terms that define those, and as well as a benefits package. So that, instead of having to import and input that into Munis on an employee by employee basis, allows HR and payroll to do it on a job class basis. So that's position control within Munis. Additionally, it allows the projections for budgeting purposes of a class of employees, so that you as an individual, collective, or department don't need to go into an Excel spreadsheet and create a spreadsheet that pulls all of this information together and puts it into and puts it into a spreadsheet. What it allows each elected to do is to run salary projections within Munis based on the actual information that's in Munis on a class of employees. Once those projections are done in Munis, they can be rolled right into your preliminary budget projection. And hopefully that's one of the goals of establishing position control within Munis, is to assist with all of the departments in their budgeting for salaries and benefits. What this conversation has led into is a conversation around the authority of the board over setting staffing levels. As a second step of what can be done even without position control. So position control doesn't necessarily lead itself into the board making decisions in regards to staffing levels within a department. Technically, that can be done without either. Technically, it could be done without position control. So those are 2 separate conversations, and I just wanted to make sure that we separated them in a conversation around position control. And that's all I wanted to put on the table as far as position control is concerned.
So I guess at this point we could open it up for a little bit of discussion. Any questions from the offices as it relates to the position control with Frank?
Not so much a question, it's just like whether or not you know the history of position control. When we were preparing to implement the new system, we had a decision whether or not we were going to create position control. At the time, the HR director was adamantly against it, and she had talked to the three commissioners, and they were also against it. She had come from Thurston County, where with her history, that did not work well. So because it was something new to us, we went, that was the decision was made. Munis told us at the time, this is like, once, this position control is, you either make a decision now, because the cat's out of the bag, you cannot put the cat back in the bag. It's very difficult to put this cat back in the bag. Well, we tried to do that in 2016, early 2016. We had somebody come out and try to work with us on position control, and they did it in train. And they were here, 2-3 days. My history is a little foggy, 2015. And so they set up something in position control with our employees. And then at that time, we had payroll, and we compared the two, and not one matched. It was going to be a huge programming change, costly, and that's the last we heard of it. So it's not an easy thing to implement at this point, and I'm just curious if the cost and the effort will be worth the benefits, because for my little department, it doesn't sound like it would benefit me at all.
Any other questions or comments on that?
So how does it project forward? You have employees who have made it through probation, yet within a year, they're looking to go from step 1 to step 2, or skill level 1 to 2. Within that budget cycle, how does that work? And we can do that on an Excel spreadsheet because we know we can forecast amongst ourselves, but how does that work with the munis system?
The immune system would assume that that person stays in the position and continues through probation, goes to a level or step that you define that employee to go to, and then processes a step increase if necessary, or makes any other changes to that employee. If you promote that employee within the year, or you tell the system to do that, it will calculate what the changes are based on what you define the parameters for the budget for that employee.
So then, because a lot of the health end of my book of business is grant driven, and each of those grants looks differently, they're not categorized in the same way, then does it require us to go back in and set these things up with each new position that comes along? Because if that's the case, it's no better than what we've got now.
When you say with each new position, if
So-
you define a new position that you're going to add, say mid-year, then you're going to need to put that into your assumptions within the parameters of the budget. Whether it's in an Excel spreadsheet or
I get that, but this is talking about managing based on classes of employees. And as you get grants, I don't think those things necessarily mesh. You may not have.
That's probably correct, yeah.
Have we looked at the cost of doing this and who's going to implement this?
It'll be implemented through HR, and the cost is a next level. So there is what's called an audit that's being performed by Munis in November, early November. And that comes with our annual maintenance, and we get an audit every 3 weeks. So as a function of what we're currently paying to Munis, they'll come out, audit what we're using the system for and how, and what are their recommendations on making improvements to the process and to Munis. Once they've completed that audit, they will be able to evaluate what it would take to implement position control. And that would be a 3-day visit, probably a 3-day visit by a training group to do the implementation, which has been running about $5,000 to $8,000.
You're saying it's going to cost $5,000 to $8,000 to implement.
By the time we're
this.
done, I would assume it'll be around 10.
So what would be the advantage to my shrinking staff? I mean, it doesn't take us that long to do those configurations to begin with. So what was,
I
How do I justify?
I don't envision the position control assisting the department, the electeds or the departments in budgetary projections individually. But what it does do is it helps HR and payroll in onboarding the employees. Because rather than do each onboarding individually, if they are classified in, within classes, which they are currently, they can be onboarded automatically, saying this person is class 1013, and then all of that information gets put into their employee master automatically without having to rekeep all of that information. It can be used as a tool to do budgeting. If the preference is to continue doing that outside, that's also an option as well. That can be an opportunity on an elected office or department by department basis.
I just want to make sure that, you know, if I'm responsible for payroll, that we're not asking for this, nor are we really in approval of this. So it's not going to, yeah, it's not, we issue the payroll, but we have no problem with how we have to process it now.
well, I guess that would be my, is it worth the cost at this point in time when we seem to have so little funding? Is it that much of an advantage to, if it's not to us, then it must be to you?
That's a decision that the board is having a conversation in regards to and going to analyze and determine what they want to do.
I'm kind of concerned about the number of staff that we have, and with the exception of a few of us throughout the office, our staff wages are going to change quickly because most of our staff was hired on a different day than the other one, and they reached their pay grades at a different time. And without asking Teresa, but I'm wondering about if it's going to be advantageous for us, or is it going to set us further behind in time? How are we going to be able to change that ourselves, or are you changing it? We submit that, you're doing all the changes, or who's?
I'm sorry, I'm not following the question. The first part, what I understood was, things are dynamic on a regular basis, and in an office where you have lots of people, that has an impact on keeping ahead of the correct information. In managing it in an Excel spreadsheet environment, somebody's going to need to go into Munis, download all of that information, and update it in an Excel spreadsheet. When did that person get hired? When's their anniversary date? What step were they hired on? When's their next step, and what is that next step? What's their payroll? What is the next step payroll? All of that's going to need to be fed into an Excel spreadsheet. Within position control, that's all there. And it's all the actual data, so there's no translation error in taking it from one system and putting it into another. It works on the actual data itself. So it wouldn't only help your department in that regard, it also helps HR in that everybody that's coming on needs all of that information input. So for every person that gets put into the system, there's a potential error in keying in that information incorrectly. But if it's defined at a class level, then every class of employee has been defined with all of those parameters previously. And then you just take the name and assign it a class, and all of that information gets fed into it. So it makes their job a lot easier as well, In some departments, you're only dealing with 1 or 2 or 3 transitions a year. But in HR, there's 100 onboards, 150 annually. And if we can reduce the amount of input that it takes to put those 120 employees in to 10, 15, because they're a class of employee, then that makes that onboarding that much easier, as well as you're updating your Excel system that much easier as well, because you're using the actual data within the unit. I hope I answered your question.
I was just concerned because some of our folks go from last week, we had somebody leave, so somebody now promotes to corporal, so their wages can go up, so legally we change that. And that is, so it's consistent throughout the year, and then they may.
You would change, your department changes it through a PAC, personnel action plan, that gets put into Munis and that gets updated. Now at budget time, you have to capture all of that information again in your Excel spreadsheet. Where if it's in Munis, then all of that's there.
Right, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
How many contracts are there? Every contract's got a different level of, but I'm guessing you
12.
understand is that 12 contracts, and then each contract's gonna have a different set of classes in it. They could have 5, 6, 7 different classes. For our contracts, at least in the guild side, I can see there's a whole litany of specialty pays that are abound in there that could switch from every month to every 6 months or hold steady throughout their career.
But within a class, those specialty pays are assigned to specific types of jobs. For instance, you would not have detective pay available to somebody that's not a detective. So actually that makes it simpler because once you've assigned a person to promotion to a detective, then all of those specialty pays for that would go with that person. It wouldn't have to be up to somebody or a checklist to say, oh, I need to put this, oh, I need to put that. And it's automatic, again, because once you've defined that class, as people promote, all of the benefits packages and all of the supplemental and specialty pays, they get all attached to that new promoted employee. Automatic, as opposed to having to manually go in and key all of those specialty boxes within the industry.
So you're saying we won't have to do tax anymore?
No, I didn't say that. You can still have to do PASS, because it's up to your department to make the decision as to who gets brought in at what level, who gets promoted, who gets demoted. Those are things that are processed through PASS, through the authority of the elected. That would continue to need to be done.
But for a step increase,
That would be automatic.
That would be automatic, so.
But again, if there's the ability, and I don't think there is, though, within the CBA to exclude somebody from a step increase. If it's automatic, then it is automatic within the system. We would need to do PASS anymore.
You've divided, you've divided the term position control into 2 different categories. And it seems like so far we're primarily talking about the first, which there's an expense and a laboring or to be had, that somebody will decide whether or not it's worth that expense and labor. But that ultimately it doesn't affect any of our operations. I mean, do I understand that right?
That is correct, other than if position control is put in place, there are some things that you won't have to do PASS for.
Right. But people that would step, will step automatic, I mean, things will work maybe different, and we'll get to the same place a different way,
Correct.
maybe a more efficient way.
Stay in the
maybe
same
not.
place in a more efficient
Right.
way.
You also mentioned setting staffing levels, and I wonder if you could talk about what that means.
So the second aspect of position control, and you don't need position control within units to set staffing levels. What the conversation grew into the last time around was, does the board have the authority to set staffing levels? And if so, how would that be done? And within position control, that is a feature that can be used to say within a group of employees, and I'm talking about the community of all employees within Mason County, for this class of employees, whatever that is, a level can be set to say that you cannot exceed 5 positions of that class within the county. So that's a function that's available in position control to establish staffing level.
Okay.
And then the conversation is, well, how does that staffing level get established? The conversation led to, how does that staffing level get established? And that can be done in a unilateral way, which is to say that a board would define that, if that's an option, or it can be done collaboratively within the departments within the county to say for managing the county's processes, we collaboratively agree that we need so many within this position, within this category class of such employee types.
So I guess my question is, other than, aside from the total dollars, which is absolutely the board's purview, why would it not be up to each official who's independently elected to run an office to determine what staffing levels they need?
That is one of the options. So it can be done
You mean it's
by,
I mean, it's an option. I'm not quite getting why it'd be an option. That's defined by law.
that is one way of establishing the staffing level, is to do it via the elected, do it collaboratively, or have it unilaterally done by the board.
Frank, do you have the RCW and stuff that you quoted at the briefing the other day?
So the RCW that authorizes the board to set staffing levels is 361607. And what it says is, in all cases where the deputies of the county office are greater than, when the duties of a county office are greater than can be performed by the person elected to fill it, the officer may employ deputies and other necessary employees for the Board of County Commissioners. The board shall fix their compensation, and shall require what deputies shall give bond and the amount of bond required for each. That's the principal statement within the RCW. So the board shall fix the compensation and shall authorize bond if necessary for each of the positions.
It doesn't say that they'll set the positions.
I mean, the numbers of positions.
That's correct. I mean,
I think my concern is on this, and I took the time to research a couple of the legal cases and speak to some people that have been through this before. Sounds very soft and nice right now, but one, I don't think, I've talked to the prosecutor about this too, and I'd like to speak to that, but I looked through some other case law, and it isn't just one RCW that defines some of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
In my conversation with somebody that's county attempted to do this across that county, a tremendous amount of money to find out that there are certain things that the board cannot do with independently elected officials. And it gets fairly complicated according to legal authorities, I suppose, who would argue this case. And I'm not sure that I'm going to rest my hat on 361607 when it's interrelated with other things, as well as independently elected officials being able to set their positions and titles, and other people not being able to come and do that. So,
All I said was that the board of commissioners can fix the compensation of a person, can approve hiring somebody and fix their compensation under that RCW. What it doesn't allow is the board to determine, it doesn't vest the power to regulate the choice of the hire, the subsequent promotion of the hire, suspension or discharge of the hire. It simply allows the board to set a level, and through the budgeting process and through 36-1607 compensation. That's all it allows.
Mike, off the top of your head, do you know what other RCWs we should be considering?
Not my chapter and verse, but there are specific statutes for instance, sheriff deputies. There's a specific title under the duties of the prosecutor for prosecutor's deputies. I guess my question is really fundamentally, regardless of what arguments might be able to be made, it sounds as though this path would lead us to a place where the board would presume to say, I don't think you need as many of this class of employee, you need more of this class of employee, to the treasurer, to the clerk, or to the prosecutor, or to the sheriff, et cetera, the auditor, the assessor, are they in the out corner? And I think we all recognize and respect very much the authority of the board to determine the dollars. But beyond what the bottom line dollars are, it seems to me that it goes too far to presume to start to organize and manage the office of an independently elected official. And that's why I wanted some clarification on it. The first category of what we call position control, I don't even know if I have an opinion on it. It seems like it's a function that our computer system has that will automate some things that are currently not automated, and if that's advantageous or if it's not, I guess I leave to people that understand it better. But if what we are talking about, I guess, is we should have a very serious conversation about what interest the board has in anything other than the dollar amount. In other words, if I have a certain number of deputy prosecutors and a certain number of legal secretaries and a receptionist, or certain classes of employees, and my budget is going to be cut, then it seems like it would be certainly up to me as the one elected to run that office and responsible for discharging the duties of that office to say, these are the positions that I have to eliminate in favor of other positions. And to the extent that we may not see eye to eye on that, I think that that's up to each independently elected.
I may add to that. Nothing that has been defined in position control, or like attempted to articulate, and actually very specifically said it doesn't best, is the ability to discharge. So in that specific instance, the board does not have the ability to articulate or to define who in layoff situation gets discharged.
Right, but it sounds like just to talk about my office, for example, we have deputy prosecutors 1, 2, and 3. Right now, because we lost a deputy 2 position in the 2017 cuts, I have 2 deputy 1s, 1 deputy 2, and 3 at the deputy 3 level. it sounds as though the board would say, we're taking out a deputy 3. Whereas I might say, no, I need that here. I'll eliminate the deputy 2, or, you know, a different position, or a different operating expense. And that's where I wonder what interest the board would even have in going beyond what the dollar amount is that I'm going to get to run my office, or Lisa, or Sharon, or anybody else. And that's, I mean, I know you're not saying that that is what we're doing right now, but certainly that's the concern when we start talking about position control in that context.
I don't understand. We were talking about the Munis system, and what the comment I heard was that there was an ability to allow a setup within a system to accomplish it. We're talking about a system, we're not talking about a decision. We're just talking about there's a system that has this ability. I'm not sure why this is being talked about unless the board is considering it. And so, I mean, it started out as a discussion of the system. Now we're talking about a policy decision, and I'm not sure, is that something that should be talked about today? Is that an issue that we need to be concerned about?
That's the question. Yes, please.
I honestly don't know how that got brought up either. I know it was floated in the conversation at some level, but all I can see is that some have no intention of telling any of their electeds how they manage their staff and what staff does, and then, you know, the dollar amount, how they work. The first role for position controls, and that term is a loaded term, so I can see what is concern around it. But in my personal opinion, and what I was hoping for was to be able to have the type of exploration on contracting, on many different policy decisions that are made. You can run scenarios by having this feature within the system. The level of research that's done by HR, just to say, if we were to do a 2% raise versus a 0.1% or something like that, is way more work than needs to happen when we have an automated system. And my whole purpose for that was to be able to run this type of scenarios that we right now have to do by hand. The other piece, I personally no desire to be attached.
Thank you for your comment on it. I absolutely agree with Mike, and Frank had mentioned earlier, these are two very different things. I would tell you that in conversation with other people that have done this for a long time, the mere mention of positional control among elected officials rings a loud bell, and it's not a good one. And again, I won't comment on the exact case, but this has been litigated and found that reaching into the elected officials to tell them or to guide them or to help them or to influence them on what the position is or what it should be titled or how many they can have is walking on thin ice. And the first one, I agree with you, Commissioner. If it makes it easier to run scenarios on funding for the next year or something, I'm not going to argue that. But if you start touching positional authority in my office on trying to decide what the title of a position is or how many you can have, or if you should have that at all, or trying to guide that, it's not going to go well. And I've discussed my position with the prosecutor on that.
So I think that the concern is are we getting into a system that allows for something that isn't really something being considered, but the concern of the department, and I can't speak for everybody, is that are we on a slippery slope at this point, that this is something that now that we can do, we're going to be readdressing it down the road when enough of the commissioners wish to pursue that.
If I may add to that, you don't need position control in order to manage staffing levels within an elected's office. Position control is an automated tool that allows HR to onboard individuals. Staffing levels and managing that can be done outside the units. So I don't think, that's what I'm trying to say here, is two are completely separate issues. I don't need position control to manage staffing levels. I do need position control in order to simplify the process of onboarding employees.
Frank, is there any way that we could, on the first aspect of that, talk with the units a little bit further when they're here for their audit, maybe
Absolutely.
demonstrate some of that for us, so we can understand a little bit better about the benefits, and then maybe a better idea about the cost. Certainly, the second part of that issue, the staffing level issue, is an area that, as a commissioner, I don't believe is my role to wade into. I think we have our hands plenty full with managing the money side of things, and I don't believe that I would make a good prosecutor, or a good sheriff, or a good coroner, or auditor, or clerk, or treasurer, or assessor, or any of those other. So I think, I certainly would give a lot of deference to the individual electeds on how they manage their offices with the money that we're able to provide through the budget process. I think that's the appropriate way to handle those things. And, we're all essentially accountable to our own constituencies. I think that's, they're the ultimate arbiters of whether or not we do a good job or not. So I would concur with Commissioner Drexler that I have no intention at this time or in the future to move toward a system in which we go into another office and determine what staffing needs you have, or who you're going to keep or let go, or any of those other issues that may come along with managing the staffing levels. Any other questions on?
I just had one. I probably didn't bring it up, but you're talking about a dollar amount to implement something that's going to make life easier for HR. I don't have funds for my appraisers. I can't even get a couple $1,000, and so to me that's kind of almost an insult that you can update your software and make it. And I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying that you're able to do this when I have people taking time without leave just so we can get to the end of the year. I find that a little bit unfair.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think what I was asking for was, since Munis is only here every so often, that we should take advantage of that and see what it would look like. And that's by no means a done deal or an agreement with Munis to implement this or any of that. It's my guess would be that if we wanted to have this conversation next year and we were outside of that audit window for Munis, then that would be an additional cost. And so I think in an effort to have a better idea of what it might look like, we might as well take advantage of Munis being here. If there aren't any other